Welcome to Tales from SYL Ranch Live, where everyone is entitled to my opinion, and I'm Bill Stone. And tonight on Tales from SYL Ranch, we will have live viewer call-ins via Skype pretty much any time that you want. We will talk about the weekly virus statistics for Lancaster County, Nebraska, where I live. We'll talk about why conservatives believe that I have now betrayed them, and how we're being manipulated by the media propaganda and big tech propaganda complexes. I also have in here a little review of Star Trek Discovery Season 3, Episode 5, Die Trying. So this is a live stream, so even if I'm not able to get to you via Skype, you're always free to talk about anything that you want in chat. I will talk about just about anything. You can ask me about questions that are political, social, that virus I can't mention without YouTube lowering my channel and videos even more than it already does, and United States Civil War II, or anything pertaining to science fiction, fantasy, superheroes, and other related genre. I'm happy to answer my questions in as much detail and as truthfully as I can. There are some personal subjects that I won't talk about, but everything else pretty much fair game. I will get to as many of my viewers as possible, with the understanding that I don't want this stream to go much longer than 3 hours, and it might be less tonight, because I have not had any sleep in more than 24 hours because of a sinus infection, and then I had some weird stuff happen in my personal life this morning. But if you would like to call into the show, I'm doing it via Skype. I don't want to give out my Skype information in public, so what I'd like you to do is this. If you're interested in being on the show, send me an email at callin@sylranch.tv. Give me your Skype information, and I will Skype you back. So again, if you're interested in talking with me directly and having me on the show, send an email to callin@sylranch.tv with your Skype information. I'll Skype you back. And that email address again is callin@sylranch.tv. Hey Marshall, hey Dalton, how are you guys doing tonight? Better than a dead stream? 42 times better, in fact. Yeah, well, at least 42. Yeah, of course, what do you get when you multiply 6 by 9 is the question. So, anyhow, we will now have the answer to the question that nobody asked. What are the weekly virus statistics here in Lancaster County, Nebraska, where I live? Well, I always like to source this stuff. You can see it in my description box. There's a link to a really good site that gives you all kinds of information about the virus statistics in Nebraska. The only thing I'd mention is it defaults to showing you the last 14 days. You should probably change that to the total. The last 14 days, I mean, you know, we've seen some upticks, but it doesn't tell you the full story. So the full total does. So the statistics this week, the total Lancaster County population remains roughly constant at 319,090. I suspect it's actually closer to 320,000 right now. Total number of tests in Lancaster County is 103,517, which is up 5,509 from last week. But remember that this is not representative of a percentage of our population, because a single positive test triggers other multiple tests on the same individual. Total Lancaster County positive tests this week is up to 11,778, which is up another 1,686 from last week. This represents a second spike that's now also over the last 2 weeks. And it probably has to do with the additional tests, and also we're getting into a time period here where outside it's below the freezing point of water most of the time, and so people are sitting inside where they're probably infecting each other. Hey, Drop of Truth, how's it going for you tonight? Total Lancaster County deaths is 51, which is up 2 from last week, which would correspond to the increased number of positive tests. Deaths as a percentage of total tested adds at 0.050%, which is up 0.003% from last week. Statistically, these are identical numbers. Deaths as a percentage of positive cases is at 0.433%, which has dropped a little bit but from last week, but really it's about statistically the same. We have generally been in this vicinity before winter started, or before the cold weather came in, of about 0.3%. So it's up a tiny fraction from the last couple of weeks, but it's still less than 0.5%. Deaths as a percentage of our total population is 0.0160%, a slight increase from last week, but it's basically statistically the same. We've got an uptick here that corresponds to the number of deaths, really, and that's all there is to it. So that is the answer to the question nobody asked. What is the virus statistics looking like now in Lancaster County? So, Drop of Truth is saying Aussie Max Egan of the Crow House fame raised an interesting issue. Why is the U.S. election fraud so obvious and provable? What his latest video is on BitChute channel. I haven't seen it. I'm going to talk about the systemic voter fraud that we clearly have going on here a little bit. But why? The reason it's not brought up really is because of our press propaganda complex and our big tech propaganda complex, which are actively working against all of this, lying about how there's none of it. Again, I'm going to talk about some of the specifics that I can talk about that I know. So I'll talk to you here about why the conservatives believe that I have started to betray them. Well, you see, when you're a libertarian, everybody who can only see two sides eventually bitches at you. For the last 4 years, liberals have bitched at me for pointing out the obvious lies of the media propaganda and big tech propaganda complexes. And don't go telling me that they don't lie, because it's patently obvious to anyone who happens to disagree with this propaganda. So now conservatives are bitching at me for pointing out that in spite of the obvious voter fraud, Trump is probably unlikely to see a second term. And you don't go telling me that there's no voter fraud, because it's patently obvious to anyone who doesn't care about Biden. So let me explain something here to you there, Lucy. I don't care about your liberals, conservative, left-right BS at all. I never have. The sole reason you thought I was on your side was because I disagreed with the other, and now it's flipped a little bit, and you think that I betrayed you. Well, guess what, guys? I am the voice of reason, while you two tend to be lunatics gibbering incessantly about utter nonsense. Sometimes, a lot of times, one or the other side happens to be right, but the rest of the time you're kind of living in a fantasy world. Let's see, Drop of Truth is saying, has Melbourne-like lockdown come to the USA yet? No, Trump is doing the way that he should on this. He's not making anything national. He's making it all related to he leaves it up to the states. That's what he's supposed to do under the 10th Amendment. And that's an appropriate thing to do, because I talk about infection vectors all the time on this show. Nebraska does not have the infection vectors of New York City. We don't need that kind of lockdown, at least not yet. New York City is a totally different perspective than ours, and really we shouldn't be punished for what New York City's doing. But I don't know. I don't know if that'll happen. If Biden gets into office, I think we can just expect it to happen. So one thing I do want to talk about here, in a place where the conservatives seem to be going nuts over, is the blockchain watermark conspiracy hypothesis. And yes, I said a hypothesis. It doesn't deserve to be a conspiracy theory, as that would imply it's gone through the scientific method. This is a conspiracy hypothesis. And I've seen this popping up everywhere, so let's just get it out of the way. The 2020 election ballots were in no way watermarked with some kind of blockchain-based thingamabob. Firstly, what most people don't know is that ballots are not printed centrally. Local printing companies are contracted to print them, and then they deliver them to the state or part of the state. And I know this for a certain fact because I once ran for South Dakota Commissioner of School and Public Lands on the Libertarian ticket. And quite by chance, my uncle worked for a printer who had the contract for the Black Hills area in South Dakota. So for there to be a watermark on all of these ballots everywhere, thousands of printing companies nationwide would need to have printed this watermark. For there to be some kind of undercover sting operation, those companies would have to be in on it. They would have to know. Now, my uncle, he's a huge Democrat, and many people who work for printing companies are Democrats. And there's absolutely no way that my uncle would keep this kind of secret. He would have spilled the beans, and so would a lot of Democrats working at printing companies around the nation. And secondly, I cannot fathom, as a guy who was in IT for 40 years, a way that a watermark would add up to some kind of blockchain. Most people don't even know what a blockchain is, much less how it can be utilized. They hear it kind of associated with Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, and they assume it to be some kind of technological magic that'll somehow supersede all other technologies. But that's not what a blockchain is, nor how it works. This entire idiocy is being fueled by one Steve, and I looked at his name. I don't know how to pronounce it, but it sure looks like it's Peasnick, a lunatic who went on InfoWars claiming that he knew everything, and he has friends in high places who have finally given him permission to tell all. Well, he is a lunatic, just the same as at least 50% of the people who ever appear on InfoWars. Please don't believe anything that you hear about this dumb conspiracy hypothesis. For that matter, I wouldn't believe anything that you see or read from InfoWars. It's like BuzzFeed. InfoWars is like BuzzFeed. It is the weekly world news of the internet. Let's see. Drop 2 saying Boris Johnson, the UK PM, has already mentioned his predictions about the UK lockdown may be wrong and it may go on for longer. What a surprise. Perchenik, is that he's pronounced? Okay, I just saw this and I went, that looks a lot like Peacenik. Anyway, he's a nut. Don't believe him. We will never be without these masks. Never. Things will never go back to normal. Because what governments have figured out is that if you're terrified, well, then we will happily hand over our freedom. And once they have power, they never, ever give it back. If it isn't this, it'll be something else, and our businesses will be, and our schools will be open at the whim of government funkies. And that is just the way it is. Once they take power, they never, ever get it back. Hey, Jeanette, how's life treating you tonight? So, let me talk about the fear, uncertainty, and doubt that we are seeing now. Fear, uncertainty, and doubt, or FUD, as we called it in IT, is something that I picked up from Microsoft in the late 1990s and early 2000s. At that time, Microsoft was starting to lose their stranglehold in IT. And in order to induce its customers to remain with Microsoft products, they would promise that the next version of their product would have every single feature that you could ever want, and all of the bugs would be fixed. But in reality, Microsoft rarely delivered on its promises, and when it did, it took years to come to fruition. This caused Microsoft's customers to remain, well, fear, uncertainty, and doubt with what amounted to buggy software rather than going to some competitor. So in essence, Microsoft used fear, uncertainty, and doubt to maintain the customer base. And today, the media propaganda complex and the big tech propaganda complex are using the exact same techniques to silence anyone who disagrees with their propaganda. Okay, so getting into some of the specifics about what's going on, and you asked Drop of Truth about voter fraud. As anyone who is paying the slightest attention knows, U.S. Attorney General Bob Barr has ordered investigations into voter fraud, and there are now suits being filed, and they have a lot of affidavits. When I was writing my remarks here, and it was earlier today, and it was a weird day, so I didn't get a chance to go and look. If somebody knows, let me know, but I couldn't find a list of the suits or the states that they are being investigated in. So you have to ask yourself, when we're doing all these suits and things, how many electoral votes are actually in play, if they're even in play at all? Because if you watch Project Veritas, you can see all the voter fraud that James O'Keefe has documented, usually with the criminal's own face and voice admitting to it. And last night, Tucker Carlson walked through instances in which dead people have voted. Because mail-in voting is clearly fraught with voter fraud, and James O'Keefe's whistleblowers have made it clear that the United States Postal Service is itself complicit in this. There is absolutely no question in my mind that there's widespread voter fraud, either intentionally or through incompetence. My viewers who've had, I have viewers now who've had multiple ballots and sent to you. You can attest to this. I had a second ballot sent to me from Iowa, where I haven't lived for more than a year. So let's do a little bit of math. I have got a bit over 300. I have 358 subs when I wrote this, most of whom are never notified about my content, and so they don't watch at all. Last week, however, I did have 103 people who watched at least part of the stream at various points in the week. That's kind of a big one for me. But out of all that, I have 3 regular viewers who were sent as many as 5 mail-in ballots for different people who had never lived at their addresses. And I myself was sent a ballot from the state of Iowa, which I've not lived in for more than a year. Now, while this is by no means scientific, I want you to think about that number for a second. I know for a fact that 4 of us got multiple mail-in ballots. And if you figure that maybe at best I got 108 views on that video, that means that at least 3.704% of my viewers could have committed voter fraud if they wanted to. What if that number, that percentage, is consistent across the U.S.? What if there are even more than 3.7 of potentially fraudulent ballots? And if you look at my videos that don't get a lot of views, the ones that never break double digits, well, if you start comparing the 4 people that I've got, myself and 3 viewers, against those smaller numbers, the percentile skyrockets. There is clear and obvious voter fraud. And if you believe otherwise, you're just simply ignoring reality. Now, listen to me, please, because this is something my father told me repeatedly over my lifetime. I don't think he came up with it, but he told me. This is what he said. The universe is what it is, not what we want it to be. Leftists want there to be no voter fraud when there clearly is voter fraud. The universe is what it is, not what we want it to be, guys. So, let's think for a minute. What would be the outcome if large-scale voter fraud is discovered? Does it automatically mean that the states that have voter fraud must pledge their electors to Trump? Drop of Truth is saying there's also the vote stealing by the Dominion who vote tallying system. Yes, getting Star Trek DS9 vibes here. Yes, that software is buggy. It's really why you shouldn't use it. You know, when you look into it, I used to have a copy of that. You can pull it down with BitTorrent. Oh my God. It's a Windows program. Anybody who's in IT knows that's just the worst possible thing it could be. Anyway, in terms of reassigning, people's electors, that's not really how it works. The states themselves, by design, choose the electors. State legislators do not have to choose them via popular vote unless their own state constitution or they have laws that require it. States with widespread voter fraud could very well choose Biden electors anyway. And even if all the states flipped their electoral votes, that doesn't mean that Trump will reach the necessary 270. He needs to win Pennsylvania, all the other outstanding states, and flip some that are currently for Biden to get to 270 votes. And that's all that matters, is the 270 votes. But what if there's no way to call it either way in states that have voter fraud? Does that mean that the state's electors will be unable to vote at the Electoral College? Or is it just more likely the state government will select electors with no regard to what the popular vote was? So if neither Trump nor Biden get the necessary 270 votes, the U.S. House of Representatives will then be in the hot seat. The House decides with 1 vote per state, depending on the state's delegation makeup. Depending on how things go, this next Congress, it's looking like it could be a nice 25-25 split Democrat-Republican. Might not be that way. There are a couple of states that are still up in the air. But even if there's a 25-25 split, that doesn't mean that every delegate, every one of our elected representatives will cast their vote solely along party lines. It is just like any other congressional vote, which means there will be crossovers. And there's no way to tell how that vote would come out. If the House deadlocks, then on January 20th, Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi will be temporarily sworn in as president. And when the U.S. Senate convenes in March, they will then vote for president. Now, even if it goes down to the Senate having something like a 26-25 Republican to Democrat margin, it's still likely that, like with any other Senate vote, it means there's going to be crossovers, and there is really no way to figure out which way that vote might go. Now, particularly with the media propaganda complex and the big tech propaganda complex working against Trump, it's quite possible that the House and or the Senate would see the obvious potential for widespread civil unrest on the part of leftists and decide that they need to vote for Biden in order to avoid it. Let's see. Drop 2 says some good news. It would seem that Nancy Pelosi didn't get enough votes to stay as Speaker of the House, so I've been told, well, we don't know that yet. They elect the Speaker of the House when the House reconvenes, and so we'll see what happens. Bresel says the currently seated House delegations will vote 28 Republican, 22 Democrat. Well, maybe. It's a vote. These people trade on stuff or decide they don't want to support the president. It might not go that way. It might not come down to just straight party lines. You never know what these jackasses are going to do. So even if everything goes his way, a Trump victory is not a slam dunk. And don't assume that just because Barr is doing something means that the state's electors will automatically go to Trump, nor that the House nor the Senate will necessarily vote for him. And then there is the potential, and they're going to have to consider this when they're voting, there's the potential for civil unrest, widespread, or even a civil war. Because let's think about the position that the House and Senate will be in if it comes down to either of them. Republicans have a very long history of accepting defeat pretty gracefully. They grumble a lot, and then they vow that they're going to do better the next time. The left now has a 4-year history of not accepting the 2016 election results. And worse, for about 170 days straight, there has been rioting, looting, arson, robbery, armed robbery, assault with a deadly weapon, and the murder of innocents somewhere in the United States every day. And I know this because I listen to first responder frequencies, and so therefore I'm aware of what the press doesn't report, which is what just about filled the Grand Canyon. And by the way, you should do the same. You should be listening to first responders, and you should be watching, citizen journalists who are on the ground with the cameras just pointing. I say this all the time. Point their cams and shut up, and you can make a decision about what you are seeing. And I have links to Broadcastify in my description box, broadcastify.com. That'll let you listen to all of the first responder frequencies almost throughout the world on the web. And there's also a link down there for an application called Scanner Radio. You can get it for either Android or iOS, and you can listen right on your phone. I do tend to do that myself. Remember, nothing you see in the press, especially now, is real. Nothing. And then we have that website that was created via a combination of public donor records and Google Maps. And I talked about this in my live stream entitled Trump Donor Hit List. And there's a link to that in my description box. And I also have pointed out to an archive on the Internet Archive of a snapshot of that website, and I've got that in my description box. It was donaldtrump.watch. And again, you can see the archive. Because it was nasty and dangerous and horrible. It allowed anyone to get directions to any Trump donor in their map application right on their phone. Now that site switched to a more generic site with totally broken functionality, and still is, less than 24 hours after I reported it to the FBI. Now, I take no particular credit for this, because when it became not public knowledge, I'm pretty sure a lot of people called the FBI. I am sure that in the event of a Trump victory, it will flip back and it will be a hit list again. But Bill, I hear you saying, if Trump wins, he can use the Insurrection Act to put an end to whatever violence the left has been cooking up. Really, that turns out not to be the case. Even my city, a red city in a red state, isn't immune, as the to-date $22 million in damage caused by rioters will definitely attest. Dropper 2 says, international flights for common folk like us are forecast to begin again from October, to and from Australia to the UK and USA in about December 2021. I think that's probably right. If they, it won't be the same at all. It's just like when we gave up our freedoms after 9/11 at Airport Security Theater. And it is Airport Security Theater, having worked in IT technology and IT security, and some of that involves physical security. I know that what they're doing is insane and impossible. In real security, what you do is you have something you want to secure and you put a perimeter around it. And you only allow people into the perimeter who have been pre-approved. What they're trying to do now is the exact reverse. They don't exactly have a perimeter, and they're trying to let anybody in and just stop the few. That's stupid. If they tried that with the president, he could measure his life expectancy in minutes. I mean, can you imagine just trying to, let anybody in but keep a few bad people out? It's like when the president goes and has, when he has speeches in places, and that makes the Secret Service very damn nervous when he's out there in public. Jeanette's saying, my city's not real red anymore, Bill. Well, it's red in terms of how it votes. We do have a Democratic mayor, but there's some movement underfoot, actually, to recall her. Precisely because of how she's handled this whole thing. But when you look at how widespread this is, there's really no way to put down an insurrection when it's happening everywhere. Because unlike the right wants to think that it'll be an easy fight because the leftists don't have guns. Well, that's nonsense. They are armed, they are entrenched, and they are organized. And it might be harder to beat them in a real combat. I don't know. They might even win. I don't know how that would go down. The situation is extremely precarious, and the House or Senate might just vote for Biden in order to avoid widespread chaos and or possibly civil war. So, our big enemies on this, really, are two things: the media propaganda complex and the big tech propaganda complex. Media propaganda complex, my God, over on Project Veritas's channel, they have multiple people coming in from, whistleblowers coming in from the United States Postal Service, and the New York Times went out and they had an article about how the first whistleblower had recanted what he'd said, and that was just plain not true. Nothing you see in the press is real. Nothing. They have, pronounced that there is no voter fraud, in spite of the fact that there's obviously voter fraud going on. But they are a propaganda complex, and so they're going to spin whatever it is that they want, lie about everything, because nothing you see in the press is real. Nothing. Drop-a-Zoo says, as I predicted, those that can afford to leave Melbourne are doing so now. Yes, houses in regional New South Wales are being sold via video phone walkthrough. They're on the market for less than 48 hours. People are starting to flee our big megalopoli here, New York City, Southern California. They're starting to flee there. Please don't come to Nebraska, because you always bring your stupid politics with you. I don't want you screwing up my state the way that you have screwed up where you came from. So the media and propaganda complex is very, very dangerous. And they've been very, very successful at propagandizing to the entire country. They've been very successful at it. I think the fact that Trump didn't win in a landslide is indicative of just how good they have been. And I think we're probably past a point of no return here. I don't see a path for our press to get any better. People are now turning off Fox News because they think that they've started to go off onto the left. I never watch Fox News anyway, because just like the rest of the press, nothing you see in the press is real. Nothing. The other big problem we have, of course, is the big tech propaganda complex. That's one that really hits me. We have started to see, because they know now that there is going to be absolutely no consequences for anything they've done. If Biden's in, forget it. All of those hearings we had, forget it. And in any case, the hearings were stupid. If you know the channel very much, I tried very damned hard to get in to see my senator who is on the Judiciary Committee, to tell him that he doesn't know the right questions to ask, and they were going to frack it up. And he wouldn't take a meeting with me. I've tried to tell my congressman. He won't take a meeting with me. It's just impossible. It was a little better when I lived in Iowa. I got to at least see some flunkies from one of my senators. But here in Nebraska, forget it. I assume that you need a nice bribe or a campaign contribution to actually get in and see these schmucks. I think the big tech propaganda complex is, again, past the point of no return. And we're seeing this now in YouTube, where people who are on the right are having just watching their subs drop. That's not because it's happening organically. It's because YouTube is dropping them. A show like mine, I'm off the radar pretty much. But my subs haven't changed, but I'm way so low that it doesn't much matter. But they have always, deranked me. My subscribers don't see when I put up new content, or if I'm doing something like this, I have to rely on social media to try to advertise myself. And over on Twitter, they're doing the exact same things. They are pulling on an automated basis, dropping people's followers who are on the right. The best thing that we can do for that is to go to alternative social media. I have social media accounts on every single social media known to man. But the two that seem to be making a big splash and that look like they might have some chance of maybe unseating these guys and are pro-free speech, even if that speech is something people don't like, are Parler and Minds. I have a link to both of those. If you want to follow me and subscribe to me on those social media, they're now going to be in every one of my shows in the description box. That's the best thing you can do, because they, again, have been very, very successful. And they know that, now if Biden's in, they will never have to face any kind of hearings ever again. They have been very successful at what they've done. They're in there, posting little notes anytime the president tweets about voter fraud. They have a little note in there that says, this is unproven, there's no basis for this. Again, just lying. But they were extremely successful. Google at the end of the 2016 election said they were going to work on avoiding a Trump situation in the future, and they pretty much did. Have a look here. Drop of Truth says, send those rich celebrities who are fleeing Democrat hellholes to Alaska. Yeah, we don't want them here in Australia. We have enough of our celebrity drongos here already. Has anyone hit the button tonight? I'm not sure. Oh, the like button? Let's see. I have to look here. I've got 3 likes. That's typically about what I get. 3, 4, 5, something like that. It depends. I've got a couple of really passionate viewers, I guess, who usually go out and give it a like the moment they see the advertising on social media. So thank you, guys. Thank you. Always appreciate my audience. You guys are great. Do like, and if you know anybody who wants to sub to me. I could use more than 358 subs. And YouTube isn't going to show me around, so the only way I can do it is by simply by advertising myself. Yeah, the likes are going up. I can see it happening. I'm not sure exactly. I have a little control panel down here that comes from YouTube, and it often lies to me about what's happening. So we have to worry about that big tech propaganda complex. President Eisenhower warned of the military-industrial complex. Now we have these other two, which we can call the media and propaganda complex and the big tech propaganda complex. And they are working against anything that looks like even could possibly be the obvious voter fraud that we've got going on right now. And I don't know ultimately which way this is going to go down. I have no idea. When you look at things like when Trump, when Biden was declared the victor by the press doesn't decide this, the Electoral College does, but when he was declared the victor by the press, there were gigantic hordes of people in places like New York City coming out to celebrate that Trump was going to be gone. These are some of the same people who are going around rioting, looting, committing arson, robbery, armed robbery, assault with a deadly weapon, and murdering innocents. It's a lot of people. When you see this, it's a lot of people. That's why I think if it goes to the House or the Senate, there's some danger that they're going to pick Biden, because they're going to look at all those people. They're going to look at their history of rioting, looting, committing arson, robbery, armed robbery, assault with a deadly weapon, and the murder of innocents. And they're going to say, I'm not sure we want that. I don't think any of them will know about that DonaldTrump.watch site if it goes back to being a Republican donor hit list. They're too dumb to understand this stuff. They're attorneys. They don't understand the technology side of it at all. It's why whenever they have these stupid hearings, I just sit there and I go, God, You guys just don't know. You have no idea what right questions to ask. None of them have the right questions. They're attorneys. They know the law. That's how they treat those things, as a legal thing, when in fact they're actually a technical thing. So that's where we are. We have those two propaganda complexes working against freedom. I've said a million times, one of my biggest fears, if Biden is in office, and they've been whining about it even since he was supposedly called, if they implement the Green New Deal, that will decimate U.S. agricultural output. I don't know how much, probably at least 25%, maybe 50%. And because my part of the country, which is largely agricultural in terms of its real estate, we feed about 1 billion people in the world. You decimate our agricultural output, and you're going to lead to starvation on a global basis, including people in the United States. Also worries me because Kamala Harris has out there a little video that's talking about how you need, equality of opportunity and all of this stuff, and it's really just socialist Marxist crap. They've tried it for 70 years in the Soviet Union, and it didn't work out very well there. They think this is some kind of new thing. I've had younger viewers on other streams who said, well, this is just the new generation. We're going to do things right. Guys, no. This is not some new thing that you're coming up with. It is exactly what the entirety of the 20th century is a textbook of, which is it doesn't work. But also, as I've said before, having taught at the college level, I know that we're now graduating people who are actually illiterate. And they don't know about the 20th century and everything that went into it. All they know is their own little myopic view of the world, where socialism and communism is freaking awesome, because that's what they were taught for 12 years of compulsory education. They're not actually taught useful skills anymore. Honestly, I've said it before, say it again, because I'm always close to education. I was teaching people, or trying to teach people, binary mathematics and logic, which is sort of the basis for computers, to people who couldn't do math on 10 fingers. And they couldn't read. I have lots of stories about that. They couldn't do regular math. Got a couple of good stories about that. But it was clear to me that we're now graduating people that should never be graduated, because what have they replaced the curriculum with? Communist and socialist indoctrination. Let's see. Dropper 2 says a drongo is a rather stupid Australian breed of stork. Okay, I didn't know that. Not a clue. My neighbor's lady friend is a wheat farmer. They had a bumper crop this year. Yay! They've had some bad years this century. Well, good. I'm glad to hear they're having bumper crops. Interesting thing about it here is where I'm at, we're actually getting shortages nationwide. I always shop at a local kind of chain called Hy-Vee. I shop there for a couple of reasons. I'm a very, very loyal customer there for something that they did that was really amazing to me. But I'm not going to talk about that. It's kind of personal. But I shop there all the time, and they don't have... I can only eat a few things because I am diabetic, and part of the way that I control it is by a very, very draconian diet. Meat, cheese, some vegetables, and they don't have the vegetables anymore. They haven't had it the last 3 times I've been in. They have some vegetables, but not the ones I need. So they're having shortages, and I'm not quite sure where that's coming from. So that's where we stand. I don't know what this is going to do. I don't know how it's going to go down. I don't know how the electors are going to necessarily be chosen. Again, I don't know for sure what states would have to require their electors to be chosen by popular vote, or if it could be done by their legislatures. And if it's done by their legislatures, if they've got a Democratic legislature, even if it's like Pennsylvania, and they find out it should go to Trump, the amount of ballot fraud, they could just decide that the legislatures are going to decide they're going to select electors who will vote for Biden. We have no idea. Not a clue. Drop 2 says, how can you expect students to learn when they're taught by teachers who are unqualified and dim as 5-watt bulbs? Again, also something I talk about a lot because, again, I've been in and around near education for most of my life. 100 years ago, teaching in a one-room schoolhouse, your average teacher had to have an enormous amount of knowledge because they were teaching many different grades and stuff like that. But the next generation of them said, there's really no reason for students to have to learn some of that stuff. Let's take it out of the curriculum. And so the next generation of teachers only knew this much. And they took stuff out of the curriculum. So the next generation only knew this much, and they took stuff out of the curriculum. So the next generation is pretty much down here, practically, illiterate themselves. They can't teach anything to anyone. So they have replaced this with communist and socialist indoctrination. Can I buy the tinned vegetables that I need? Not really. Not really. There's canned mixed vegetables that I eat a lot. And the canned mixed vegetables are not available. I can't get spinach. That's another thing I can eat. Not available. If you go through the store, there's only there's only a few things that I can buy. I walk up and down the aisles and I go, okay, here's something I can get. Another aisle. Here's one thing I can get. Another aisle. Here's one thing I can get. It gets crazy. But they're out of some of that stuff. And worse, what's happening now is that a lot of people are ordering and then, coming for pickup so that they don't have to go inside the stores themselves. When I was there the first time earlier this week, my God, it was insanity. It was just all of these people with these big freaking carts, going through a list that they'd gotten off the internet and pulling things down and putting them onto specific places on the cart. There were at least 7 of those in a very large grocery store. It's a superstore basically. And my God, it's amazing. That was making it worse. Actually, that was making it worse. Jeanette says, Bill, go to Pack and Save in Seward, Nebraska. Pretty fully stocked. I'll take a look at that. I'll take a look. If it continues to be problematic at Hy-Vee, I may go down and look at that. Like I say, the thing is, I really like being a customer of theirs. The short reason for that is that at one point, one of my family members left $2,000 in cash at their customer service desk. And they didn't keep it. Nobody kept it. They called the police. The police brought it over. We had a conversation. And I went back to them and I said, if you can tell me who it was that called that cop, I'll give him $100. I thought, man, that would have been so easy to just pocket and never see it again. So I tried to go to Hy-Vee because they did that. It was amazing to me. So that's where we kind of are at 9:42 p.m. Central Time. I have no idea which way this is going to fall. I have no idea. I certainly see potential for significant civil unrest and potentially actual civil war, as I have warned about. The only thing about things going nuts the way that they are is it's got the people who do all that rioting, looting, arson, robbery, armed robbery, assault with a deadly weapon, murdering innocents, got them kind of confused. They don't know what to go do. But I gather, I've heard that, and I didn't check the news on this today. It's been a weird day. I didn't check the news on it, but apparently Biden is busy meeting with Black Lives Matter and stuff to see what they want. Black Lives Matter, the organization, is Marxist. Anytime a president is talking to Marxists and is willing to, give them something, that's really bad. That's really bad. And if we had an honest press, they would come down on that too. But again, the press, largely socialists and communists themselves, living in a bubble, and they don't know that the rest of the world doesn't agree with them. And that's why what they tend to write isn't, nothing you see in the press is real. Nothing. Just don't do it. So let me throw in something here to break things up for those of you who might come in for things like Star Trek. Let's have a look at my monitor here, because last time it blew up my last time it blew up my sound. I want to make sure that I'm not being weird. Nope, it's good. I sound all right. Drop of Truth says, can you use is it albumin, egg white powder as a protein substitute? Getting the protein isn't so bad. I can get all the meat and cheese that I want. It's just that it gets so boring after a while. But it helps the diabetes. It keeps me off some medications. So it's worth doing. I have a theory that the reason that we have so much, an epidemic of type 2 diabetes is because everything on those shelves is full of sugar. So you get kids who are from birth eating nothing but high, sucrose type sugars that break down quickly and screw up your body. I'm pretty sure that's what it is. Because if you look at my diet, practically no sugar, no carbs, and it's a lot of protein, and it's some vegetables, not many, because some of them have too many sugar and carbs added. But what I can buy, it is so limited. It is so limited. And I think if you're a parent right now, go and look for low-carb, low-sugar foods. They won't cost very much. It's the same as anything else. You can go and do things like get Atkins foods. Atkins is a low carb, low sugar diet. They sometimes have those at this superstore that I go to when they're not out of it. They sometimes have those. It costs an arm and a leg, but for me it's worth it because I can eat what amounts to a piece of candy without having to worry about it killing my blood sugar level. Drop 2 says, if you're O blood group, then high protein diet is good for you. You're O. Yeah, I'm O negative, I believe. But it's pretty much good for anybody. It's pretty much good for anybody. Getting the sugar out of your diet and your kids' diet is good. I will tell you, having done it, it is an addiction. You will run into some level of addiction when you're not taking the sugar. It wasn't horrifying. I don't think it's like getting off of heroin or something. But it is an addiction, and you can feel it when you have stopped eating sugar. It's really good. But again, for me, it helps because I'm on some medications, but it keeps me from having to do things like take insulin shots every day. So I just kill myself with a diet. So, Star Trek Discovery, Season 1, Episode 5, Die Trying. Okay, this is kind of weird for me. My previous scale has been 1 being existentially threateningly bad, and 5 being passable. I actually thought this one was okay. I was watching it, and I went, wow, this kind of feels almost like Star Trek. I've always said that, one of the big things about Star Trek that has always attracted me is that it is a future that I would like to live in, a utopian type future. Now, with the Federation fallen, it's not a utopia, but man, you see all of the nice, bright places that they're in and all the cool technology that's now in the 30th century, rather, and I'm just like, wow, that's pretty cool. That part of it is pretty neat. They did some science fiction stuff where they were talking about scientific things that actually were real, that made sense, unlike their stupid spore drive. And the biggest thing I had with it really was, my biggest criticism of it was, like all of these modern shows do, and you see it really bad on the CW superhero ones. They'll be in the middle of some kind of action, trying to do something, and then all of a sudden they'll pull the brakes and stop to talk about their feelings. That was really weird in this one because they are under a time crunch. They had like 3 hours to go and do this thing they had to do. And you're like, they keep stopping, looking for what they need. They keep stopping to talk about their feelings and say goodbye. And it's just like, you got 3 freaking hours to get this thing and then also synthesize what amounts to a cure for something. Why are you sitting around talking about your feelings? It's just like, okay, we got to go do this thing. Oh, you're going to stay. Okay, got to run. Bye. It's the usual kind of soap opera drama, and it's just kind of dumb. See you later, Jeanette. I'm happy to have you in here anytime at all. So it's just kind of dumb. And again, as always, Burnham is a Mary Sue, and she is insolent. She is damn near insubordinate. And of course, everything revolves around her. They can't do anything without her. I don't know how she qualifies to be the first officer of any ship. She is too unpredictable and insubordinate, which is what I've said before. Driver 2 says, was it a J.J. Abrams mystery box plot? No, it wasn't. It was pretty straightforward. You haven't seen it, I won't spoil it for you, but it was pretty straightforward. for the first time in a long time, it really kind of felt like Star Trek. I wouldn't give it a high mark, but it has brought my expectations up to where they're above Dinosaur Bones, which has not happened with this show ever. I think that what they should have done is, instead of starting out making it a prequel, they should have put them in like the 26th or so century. That would have made sense with all the technology that they have that doesn't fit at all with what's going on behind me here. If they started them out in like the 26th century and then they went forward to the 30th, okay, that would have been okay with me. And so what they're doing with it now, and all this cool technology that they've got in the 30th century, and they have more money than God, so they can show us all kinds of stuff and do different things. I think that's kind of cool. I like that part of it. It's just that they started out, 2 years in the wrong time frame. It should have been much, much later, after, Next Generation, after Picard. I'd have put it in like the 26th century, so that all the technology on the Discovery is all new and cool. It still wouldn't have helped them with a lot of the other stuff and the soap opera drama of Pointless. But it would have made more sense technologically, and then they could have jumped forward and had all the same stuff that they've got going on now. Still think it's a bad idea to have had the Federation fall. The Federation was Gene Roddenberry's idea of what Star Trek should be incarnate. And when you have it fall, I think you're just screwing up Star Trek in a bad way. But given that they've done that, what they've done here wasn't bad, I thought. I had my issues with it because it kept pulling on the brakes. But in terms of what the story was, I thought that was okay. I thought the story was okay. I liked the cool technology that we're seeing. It is a future, again, that I'd like to live in. I never wanted to live in Discovery's future before. But this 30th century future, I would actually like to live in. It's kind of cool in terms of what they have. Irritated me. You guys. Okay. There is no Federation headquarters, okay? Starfleet has a headquarters. It's a quasi-military organization. It has a headquarters. Federation is a government. They have a capital or something like that. Why do you keep calling it headquarters, Federation headquarters? It's like a capital or something. It bugged me throughout them using that. Drop Truth says you can't spoil manure. Bill, you said that last week. Yeah, but this isn't quite that bad. There were a lot of callbacks. We get a new USS Voyager J, I think it was. There's a USS Nog, which is a nod to Star Trek Deep Space Nine. Nog was a relatively minor character there who went on to go to Starfleet Academy, and, I'm okay with that. Nog was kind of a goofball. But he went to Starfleet Academy, kind of straightened up. You can imagine maybe much later in his career, maybe he did something that would be worth naming a ship after him for. I'm not, that seems to bother a lot of original series fans, and it didn't bother me. That callback didn't bother me. The brief look at the the Voyager J did not bother me particularly. So I thought those kind of callbacks, and there were others. The one that probably nobody noticed that I thought worked well was when they were on that ship, that siege ship, and they had a creature that was a plant that would come out and do things to try to grab stuff and then go back into a kind of a tube. Well, that is a higher tech version of a plant called Beauregard that we saw one time in Star Trek the original series. It was never a good effect, not even then, because it was quite clearly in that some guy's hand coming up. I never bought it. Nobody ever bought it. So the way they've done it now with better special effects, I can appreciate that and I like. So there was a lot of callbacks. I think, again, for the first time, it actually seemed like a Star Trek episode. They're talking about technical things, scientific things that they never talked about before, at least never got right. I thought it was kind of nice, actually. They have an ion storm. Well, that's kind of a callback. Original series had ion storms. And in one particular episode, it's a very good episode called Court Martial, they had run into an ion storm and limped back to a starbase. We never saw the ion storm. We didn't really have to. But now they have more money than God, so they can show it to us. I thought that was all right. The ship that they were towing out there, having a lot of plants on it, I didn't have a problem with that. Crew member whose name escapes me because I really don't remember most of these people, who stayed behind. I thought that was okay. That's in keeping with a lot of the stuff that we've seen before in Star Trek, so I thought that was okay. My only problem with it was it went on forever. They're under this time crunch. They have to sit there talking about, well, I'm going to stay, and I really remember, Burnham, what you said at somebody's funeral. And I'm like, why does Burnham have to be the center of the freaking universe? You can just say, no, I'm going to stay. Okay, bye. But they had to sit down and hug each other and cry and, eating up all this time that they needed in order to get this thing done. They had 3 freaking hours. So, as I say, I didn't think it was bad. I didn't think it was great. It certainly wasn't great. But it's the first time in 2.5 years that this seemed like an actual Star Trek episode. Not a great one, but a Star Trek episode. So I was okay with it. I was okay with it. So if I had to have a new scale, 1 being passable and 5 being outstanding, I would have to give this probably about a 3. I don't think it was horrible. First time that's happened. You'll probably see the usual outrage reviewers on YouTube that are going to scream and holler about it. It was terrible and did this wrong and that wrong. And you always have to remember that, the technologies you see on Discovery doesn't match this at all. So it really should have been something that was put farther in the future instead of in the past. I'm worried that if they actually do Star Trek Strange New Worlds, that they'll obviously have all this new technology that doesn't remotely match this. I really wouldn't do any more shows in that era. You've got a whole lot of time frames that you can play with. There's no reason that you have to stick around, getting, basically trying to get original series fans like myself to watch it because it happens before Kirk is, no, you don't need to do that. Go out and do your own thing like they are here this season. If the other 2 seasons didn't exist, or if they had started out in a much later period, like the 20th century or something like that, I could have gone along with that. They'd have to do different stories because they sucked. But if technologically wise, if they'd started carving their own path from the beginning rather than trying to piggyback off of something else, I think I would have liked this show okay. I mean, I probably wouldn't be in love with it because of, the nihilism and stuff and the gore and, the pointless swearing and stuff like that. But it wouldn't have been as terrible, I don't think. And like I say, for the first time, it actually sort of felt like a Star Trek episode. Dropper 2 says, Bradley Washington, Tosin Cole are rumored not to be returning to Doctor Who season 13. I guess their other shows got canceled. They're rumored to be returning now? They shouldn't do that. They shouldn't do that at all. There's 2 problems with this female doctor's tenure. The first one is they have too many companions. They're only giving them 10 episode seasons. That's barely enough if you have 1 companion and the doctor to do character development for them both. When you have 4 of them, it's just insane. It becomes impossible to really concentrate on the necessary character development, so the whole thing feels very flat. That's one of the biggest problems dramatically that they have. The other one is, like damn near every place else, they're pushing woke politics on us and constantly doing, nothing but shoving things in our faces that are so obvious. It's not quite as bad. Well, yeah, it is sometimes as bad as Star Trek, the original series episode, Let That Be Your Last Battlefield. That's the one with the half white guys and the half black guys, one black on one side and the other one white on that side. As a morality tale about race relations in the 1960s. People look at it today and they say, I've heard them, they say that it ages well. And I'm like, really? Because we hated that. It was a dumb episode. It was too much on the nose. It was like, okay, yeah, we know exactly what you're talking about. It was kind of dumb from my perspective. But if they're going to bring back more companions for this doctor, that's a bad idea. Chris Chibnall's a hack. He can't write this stuff to save his life. And I assume that what would happen is if he left, Jodie Whittaker would leave. I don't dislike Jodie Whittaker's doctor. I just don't think she's being written very well. If they had somebody, and you can't get Stephen Moffat back. You can't. It would not be the same. Stephen Moffat jumped the shark with The Day of the Doctor. He made the best Doctor Who episode ever. It was the best one ever. When they come around for the 60th anniversary, which is not that far off, they're going to have a hell of a time trying to find something that matches up to that. It was the best Doctor Who episode ever. Where do you go from that? Well, he did what they always do. He went for nihilism. And frankly, that's not what the Doctor should be. Matt Smith's Doctor really did do it for me because his whole thing was, this is like a fairy tale. That's what the Doctor should be. Not some nihilistic thing, where your companions are being killed off in horrible fashion and stuff like that, and being turned into Cybermen and things. So he just, he jumped the shark. He should have left with Matt Smith, and they should have brought somebody else in. So you can't get him back. I don't know who you get, but you need to find somebody who can write, who does know how to do character development, and somebody who can, write for these characters and come up with good plots. I mean, the thing about Matt Smith's Doctor that really stands out is, for me, if you think about it, this is a guy who actually had very little control of his own actions. Because of the whole River Song subplot, he didn't really have control of his own actions. He knew what stuff was coming up. Sometimes he knew he had to do certain things at some times. And for me, it would be like if I was him and after River Song was over, I'd be like, okay, I am never getting involved with anybody that can time travel ever again, on their own. It's too crazy. It sets up paradoxes. It sets up things that makes me impossible to do some of the things that I would like to do just personally. Drop2 says, how can anyone develop a character in a block of wood like Yaz? Yeah, well, I guess maybe whittle and carve her into something watchable, maybe. It's just the problem with having too many companions and too few episodes. If you're only going to have 10 episodes, just have one companion. You can do your character development between those two characters, the Doctor and her one companion. You have 10 episodes, forget it. It's just impossible. And that's what they ran into. So that's my general feeling about Star Trek Discovery Season 3. Oh, I've got that wrong down here. It should be Season 3. Oh, well. Season 3, Episode 5, I didn't think it was horrible, which surprised me. There were points in there where I actually enjoyed myself. That has not happened before. It has either been in the range of making me, want to projectile vomit and insulting my intelligence. And this time around, it wasn't horrible. Wasn't great. This is not up to the level of Best of Both Worlds on Next Generation or City on the Edge of Forever in the original series. Is not that good. But it wasn't horrible. It finally felt like maybe this is a Star Trek thing. That's not happened with this show before. So that is my general feeling about that. Actually kind of worked for me. It wasn't horrible. I didn't think it was terrible. Drop2 says, my live stream is quite fuzzy blurred this week. The audio is fine though. Might want to check and see if you've got 1080p set up on yours. Because let me check here on mine. I've got 1080p at 60 frames per second on my secondary monitor, which is my phone. And that's it doesn't look bad there to me. So you might want to check and make sure that you're set to 1080p rather than something lower. That happens sometimes when I'm watching videos. So yeah, that's where I'm at. It wasn't bad. That hasn't happened before. I still don't understand why Giorgio isn't in prison. I mean, they were interrogating her. They knew that she was a multiple murderess and came from a universe that was horrifying. She should never have been allowed out of the brig. And now that they're at Starfleet headquarters, she should go to some very secure facility and never be let out again. She is untrustworthy. She is, she's going to just backstab and double cross at some point. You just know it's going to happen. She shouldn't be on there. And, Burnham is remaining too confrontational with superior officers, bordering on insubordination. The thing about it is, too, right? They had this whole subplot about how Starfleet was going to take the Discovery, reverse engineer this drive, which they should. They need it. And then they were going to, take the crew out, figure out where they could put them on other ships or other assignments. And Burnham's like freaking out over this. Like, okay, you're in a quasi-military organization. Your assignments vary. You may be assigned to one ship, and then you get assigned to some other ship, and maybe you get a ground assignment for a while. Maybe you go to Starfleet Academy, and you're an instructor for a while. You don't constantly stay on one ship for your entire career. So her being all, up in the Admiral's face about that, staying on the ship and all that, sorry, this is the life you chose. You chose to live a life that's basically like the military. You go where you're told. You don't get in your admiral's face and be damn near insubordinate. So, that's where we are with that. As I said, I am unclear how long I'm going to go. I had no sleep at all last night. I have a sinus infection. I get them chronically. I can talk about that a little bit because it relates to what we're doing with this virus that I can't mention. So I have a sinus infection, right? I get these chronically. I used to get them really terrible. Till about 20 years ago, in 2000, I got sinusoidal surgery. It was funny because I was so used to the way that I felt. When they did, I forget it was a CT scan or MRI or something of my sinuses, I went to my ENT, he says, so are you in constant pain? I'm like, no. And he says, well, here's what a normal sinus is supposed to look like. Here are your maxillary sinuses. You're filled with nothing but infected gunk, and we got to get it out. And he was right, because afterwards I realized that I'd become so used to the pain, there was just background. So I used to get these really bad chronically until about 20 years ago, and then I still get them from time to time. And I know exactly when they're coming on. I know exactly what's happening. I know exactly what needs to happen from the doctor. I basically just instruct them. I go to my GP and I say, I got a sinus infection coming on. Maxillary sinuses are packed and it's tender to the skin and I'm having a hard time sleeping. The next step is going to be a rasping, hideous cough. So what you need to do is get me on antibiotics and get me a codeine-based cough suppressant. We're done. Well, I couldn't go to my GP because I had a sore throat. Because it drainage out of my sinuses going down back of my throat. I had a sore throat. So they wouldn't see me. Too much like COVID, they thought. I don't know. So they wouldn't see me. They had me on a Zoom conference with one of their physician's assistant, which I've had really bad experiences with PAs. I don't like to do it, but my GP was otherwise busy. So they had me on a Zoom, and I'm like, okay, well, I know all about what's happening to me. I can just rattle off my symptoms. Give me this, give me that. I'll go pick up the meds. But what if there was somebody coming in that, A, didn't have parents who were both in the healthcare industry, B, didn't chronically get stuff, and so they, didn't know exactly what was happening and how to just communicate it to the doctor and say, give me this, let's go. What if somebody they couldn't have in the office, the diagnosis, you're not touching them, you're not, checking any heartbeats, you're not checking for rasping cough or, looking and seeing if there's inflammation, because I had inflammation of my glands here. And what if you don't know that stuff, and don't like to brag, really, but I'm pretty bright, and I know that. And again, I had, parents in the healthcare field, so I sort of speak the language. But what if you don't have that? What if you're part of the 50% that's below average? 50% is above average, 50% is below average. What if you're one of the below average and you can't just rattle this stuff off? What do they do? And I asked the PA, and he wasn't specific because I hadn't seen him before. One of the interesting things about having parents that were in the healthcare field and sort of being able to speak the lingo is that once you've gained their confidence, they will tell you anything that they wouldn't ordinarily say to other patients, because they go, oh, here's somebody who understands the lingo. So I wasn't, I haven't seen this guy before, so I didn't, have that. And he was very non-specific. And he was saying, well, if we think somebody's got like strep throat, we might have him come down to the, because you have to take a swab for that. So might have him come down and we'll swab them in the parking lot. My only thing was I sure hope that most general practitioners and people like physician's assistants here in the U.S., I sure hope that their malpractice insurance is paid up, because I have a sneaking suspicion that they're going to need it. Well, that's just one of the ways that, it's screwed up medical care. Everybody's so frightened of this after 51 deaths in a city of 320,000. They're so frightened of it that they're like, okay, we're going to, not let him come in because he's got a sore throat, I get that they couldn't know that, I explained to the people when I was making the appointment, I have a sinus infection. Here's what's going on. I do it all the time. Here's what I'm going to need. Who can I get in to see? But I get where they have to go, oh, he's got a sore throat. Could be COVID or something. But it's really screwed things up for people. I think in the long term, it's going to really screw things up for people. It's going to be people who are sick that don't get diagnosed correctly, because how do you do that on a Zoom meeting? You can't even touch your patient. The best you can do is ask questions, and that won't necessarily get you the right answers. Go watch House. That was a little over the top, but you got to be able to see, feel, and touch your patient in order to really make a good diagnosis. It was just utterly ridiculous. It's the same thing we got going on in our public schools, by the way. Heard a radio report recently, some news thing, and it turns out that now they're doing a lot of schooling via Zoom meetings, and that's just a waste of time, because having worked in that, and done some teaching at the college level, I know from working with people there that most teachers don't have the necessary skills to make online learning materials that are effective. And the other part of that is most students don't have the drive to do the work without somebody sitting over their shoulder. You have to have that. That's it. Most students won't be able to do it. Well, turns out in our city, and I don't know how many students there are in our public school system, over 5,000 have never logged in to do any of their work, and we are nearing the end of a semester. That doesn't surprise me in the slightest. I saw that all the time when I was teaching. If there was online coursework to be done, without somebody sitting there breathing down their neck, there was just nothing you could do. Nothing you could do about it. And of course, with University of Nebraska, all of the schools, whether it's the college level or K through 12, they really should just shut down and go home. If they're not really going to be teaching, because I saw some stuff that's going on. Oh God, University of Nebraska. I have a nephew who's in ROTC there. I'm trying to get him to concede that he needs to be an officer. Company's arrived. Drop a tooth. Okay, see you later. Catch you later. On demand. But his education is a pointless exercise in futility. The only thing that gets reliably done, near as I can tell, is he has PT, physical training. That's about it. In his ROTC stuff, he has stuff like where he only has labs once or so a week for certain classes, and you can't have too many people in it. And he's looking at biology, right? Biology. You gotta hunker down and do work for that. And a lot of times too, when you're at the first semester of college, that's where they kind of say, here's the rules. This is what you need to do. We're going to try to keep you following it. And then after that, you tend to disobey the rules. Maybe you'll show up. Maybe you won't always go to a lecture. You'll be doing something else. Maybe you want to, or you just say, screw it. I'm not getting it out of this. I can pass the tests and do the coursework without it. But when you're in that first year, you really need to have some kind of structure so that you are used to what is going to be coming up. And then you can make the decision for yourself as an adult whether you're going to follow that structure or not. University of Nebraska should just be shut down. I assume the rest of the colleges are doing it. My gym is with Union College. It's a small gym, but it doesn't cost very much. And they've got stuff set up where, last I knew anyway, because it's varied so much, at one point they were letting people go in and work out, but you couldn't use the locker rooms. You had to, middle of the winter, you have to come in, your sweats or whatever you're going to work out in. You couldn't use the locker rooms. And that was when you could get in. I don't even know if they're doing that anymore now. It's been hard to follow. So I think the colleges and universities ought to just shut down until they have this over with. It might be the thing that actually pushes the government to open things back up. You get all these students who are missing an entire year. If you close the universities, they'd be not getting all of that income. That might push them to, say to the government, my God, we're going broke. We're not teaching anything. Our students are suffering. You got to open stuff back up. That might be something that they could use as leverage, but they don't. University of Nebraska, they'll take any Nebraskan who has a check, and boy, I know that because I flunked a lot of stuff when I went there. A lot of colleges and universities would have kicked me out. No, as long as you got a check, you get to sit in a chair. Straightened up eventually, but there was stuff that I just blew off and ended up, failing. So that's going on with our schools here, and I assume it's got to be very similar elsewhere. If your kid's on a Zoom meeting, just forget it. They're not going to learn anything. The best you can say is that since they're home, if they're going to be fed communist and socialist propaganda, at least you're in a position to counter that. I would really suggest just homeschooling. I always do. I don't know how the Catholic schools are anymore. My kids went to Catholic school through 4th grade, I think, and then my ex moved to Chicagoland. But that was a good school. It was such that when I remember one time I was on the phone to my daughter, and she was so far ahead. She said, I can't believe these people don't know this stuff. I learned this like 2 years ago. So that was a good school, but I have no idea what that looks like now. It's been 10 or 15 years, I guess. She would have been 10 when we divorced, and she's now in her pushing 30. God, am I old. So I don't know if it's necessarily they're still good schools, but they were at that time. And if you're doing stuff via Zoom, how the hell can you... I don't see how that works. I don't see how it works. Even the communist and socialist indoctrination, I don't see how that works. I don't see it. So the screwed up education. I can't reiterate enough that we will never get our freedoms back that we gave up for this. Just the same as we'll never get them back for airport security. There is no civilization in history at all that ever voted itself more freedom. Freedom comes usually at the cost of shedding the blood of patriots and tyrants alike. You don't ever vote yourself more freedom. It has never happened, and I think it's real hubris. In the words of, I won't say from Star Trek Picard, sheer fracking hubris to think that the United States is any different. And you just look at airborne security. It's a pointless waste of time. A completely pointless waste of time. It does not provide any security. All it is, as we know now for sure, is a den of thieves. Those guys go around ripping stuff off out of your baggage, and we know this for a fact now. So if it was me, I'd just tear the whole damn thing down and go back to what we had before, because this isn't doing anything useful. But we won't, because once they have power, they will never willingly give it up. Never, ever willingly give it up. It's why there's a movement afoot to recall our mayor here in Lincoln, Nebraska, because of the way she's handled all of this. and the fact that she is now sort of king of her own little fiefdom of Lincoln, Nebraska, and people are starting to get pissed off about it. I haven't been involved in any of that because I don't think they'll be successful. I'm not sure how successful you can be because the media propaganda and big tech propaganda complexes have successfully frightened the frack out of people. I have a niece who's very young, about to go to school, I think, next year. She's now frightened to go anywhere without her mask. Just a little kid. She's going to grow up with that, just like my kids grew up with airport security. They just like, oh, okay, I don't know anything better. I don't know about these freedoms because I have never had them. That's where we're going to go with this if it keeps up. If Biden gets elected, if Biden is the next president, he has been clearly stating he's going to put national mask orders in place and national lockdowns, which is unconstitutional. Hopefully, the new Supreme Court with the more conservative makeup would rule what he's doing unconstitutional, but you never know. The Supreme Court has a long history of kind of siding with the president, whichever president it may be. It's like looking right now, I haven't checked to see where they're at with it, but they're hearing cases about Obamacare and whether it should be kept around. Well, Obamacare is totally unconstitutional. There's no language in the Constitution that authorizes the federal government to be involved in medical care or insurance in any way. It's unconstitutional. That's the way it needs to be ruled. But the problem is we now have at least 10 years, maybe more, of what's called legal precedent. People have tried cases and used precedent that was set with Obamacare in order to try them or have a judge decide what punishment is, depending on what the thing is. When you have legal precedent, that makes it much more difficult. The Supreme Court is going to look at it and say, if we take this away, we're now destroying all this legal precedent that came before. And I don't know what they'll do with that. It's the same with Roe v. Wade. They'll never repeal Roe v. Wade. They'll never strike it down. And that clearly is also unconstitutional. That was legislation from the bench, that if something was going to happen with that, should have happened with the legislative branch. But it was legislating from the bench, and there's no language in the Constitution, whether you like it or not. There's no language in the Constitution that involves murder or, anything with abortion. There's nothing there. There are no federal laws against murder. Those are left to the states. So it was unconstitutional on the face of it. It should have been sent back down and said, no, if you want to do something with this, you got to do it at the legislative level, on the state level. 10th Amendment. Anything not in the Constitution, which is a lot of things, mostly everything is not in the Constitution, it's left to the states or the people. But as I often say when I go through my history lesson, the Constitution didn't really last more than 18 months. They put in a tax on whiskey and got the Whiskey Rebellion because these guys were growing grain and turning it into whiskey, and they suddenly got taxed, and they said, hey, this is not what we fought this revolution for. So there was a Whiskey Rebellion that was put down, and that was our first set of taxation that was extra constitutional. And then my favorite politician, the only politician I have as a favorite of mine of all time, Thomas Jefferson, made the Louisiana Purchase. Well, there's no language in the Constitution that authorizes the federal government to add territory to it. Now, he was getting it for a song, so I kind of get it. I'd probably done the same thing myself. But even he said it strained the Constitution to the breaking point. He tried to get a constitutional amendment that would then give the federal government the authority to go and buy this stuff. But he didn't have it. Then we get to Lincoln, who did, have a war to free slaves, and freeing slaves was a good thing. But at the same time, he consolidated power in the federal government and took it away from the states. I think he basically was the guy who pounded the final nails into the coffin of the Constitution. Then we had FDR, and everybody since him has just been pissing on its grave. I have not had a constitutional republic in my entire lifetime. I have a notion about what it would look like, but the only people who've had even a vague amount of experience with it, my grandparents, their generation's dying, greatest generation. My parents, getting older, starting to go away. I've never had an actual experience with individual liberty. I haven't had a constitutional republic in my entire life. In my entire 55 years on the planet, we've not had it. So when they get to things about the Constitution, you just never know which way they're going to drop. Because for me, I'd look at everything, just damn near everything. Department of Education. There's nothing in the Constitution that says the federal government should be involved in education. That should go away. Department of Transportation, Department of Labor, Department of Agriculture. There's nothing in the Constitution that authorizes the federal government to be involved in any of those things. They should go. But even the hero of the right, Ronald Reagan, he created the Department of Education. Clearly, he wasn't all that caring about the 10th Amendment or any of that stuff. So you got that. You got our, issues with the propaganda complexes and how successful they've been. And again, the only thing we can do in terms of the big tech propaganda is to try to get away with it with alternative social media. The two that look to be pretty good right now, again, Parler is really starting to take off due to the fact that there's a bunch of conservative talk show hosts and stuff that use that pretty directly. Dan Bongino, who's a ex-Secret Service guy, he does videos, and he's very, very heavy there. I have gone over there, I do 2 sets of advertising for the show. I try to do one the day before of the show, and then put that out there to a number of different places. And then the day of the show, I had been doing 15 minutes before it starts, ad copy on Facebook and also on Twitter. I'm now doing the ad copy on Facebook, Twitter, Minds, Minds.com, and Parler. Minds and Parler seems to be the ones that have at least the biggest potential right now to unseat Facebook and Twitter. I don't know how that's going to go down. But really, that's the only way to get that from under their thumb is to walk away, and hopefully Facebook will turn into MySpace, if anybody remembers that. That was the social media that came before Facebook, and Facebook was better, and so MySpace kind of died. It's still out there. I still have an account, but I don't know why exactly. I suppose I could throw my ad copy in there. I'm already throwing it in like 9 different places. But I have accounts on everything known to man. Let me pull them up so that I can talk about it. This is my ad to copy stuff. I have accounts I post to social media that I notify. I post to my Subscribestar. By the way, if you want to go to my Subscribestar and give me money, that's great. I have a link on my webpage that'll take you there, and it also has things for my Teespring. I've got some stuff on sale at Teespring. But I send out my marketing copy the day before, usually to Subscribestar, MeWe, which is another interesting one in terms of trying to replace Facebook. I'm not clear that it's growing fast enough to do that, but it's a possibility. MeWe.com. There's something called Slug, which I haven't yet investigated too much. I have an account there. Facebook, of course. Twitter, of course. Instagram. I send my stuff up there. Minds.com. Gab.ai. Parler. Telegram, which is an application that actually runs on your desktop. It's supposed to allow you to, go back and forth. If you guys, ever want to add me as a friend or something on Telegram, it means that it's like an instant message platform, basically. And then finally, Tumblr. I also do Tumblr. And I've got a couple of other accounts that are kind of dormant, but those are the big ones that I hit. And right now, looking at the way it's going, Parler has some chance of unseating Twitter. I don't know how big a chance, but it has some chance. And that's really the only thing that you can do, is walk away from these social media platforms that are part of the big tech propaganda complex. Now, you can't get away from it completely because of your phones. If you got, Apple is going to be watching your iOS phone and knowing where you are all the time, and it's probably got, especially with Siri, it's got the microphone turned on, and it's sending you back everything that you freaking say to them. And similarly, Android, oh God, what I wouldn't give if I could rip out the guts of Android and replace it with something else, because what Google does is just insidious in terms of what they are capturing in terms of your information. They had an article recently in a a website that's called Slashdot. It is literally the word slash.net. And Slashdot is a place it's basically a big forum for geeks like myself. And so they'll have more technical articles that get a little into more depth about technology. And they had one today that was about how Google is pulling all this information. It knows where you are, and it changes what it shows you based on your location. Well, I already knew that because I'd noticed years ago that if I was at work and I was doing certain types of Google searches, I was mostly doing technical Google searches. So, okay, something's busted. I'm not sure how to fix it. I'll Google and see if anybody else has fixed it, which usually they had. So I was seeing certain types of things in my searches that were solely technical related, right? If I went home, searches that I did there would be, a lot more stuff would pop up for like science fiction, and that didn't pop up at work. So I'm the same person. It's just that I have different habits at home than I do at work. Well, Google, they finally figured out, I knew it, but they finally figured out, my colleagues actually did some testing, and yep, sure enough, Google is deciding based on what your location is, because if you got one of their phones, they're going to decide where you are and give you different types of experience with their platform. I even noticed it when I was driving, right? Because I usually had a 20-minute or so commute living in this small town close to the city, and going into the city, I have a 20 or so minute commute. And I don't really listen to the radio very much. I tend to listen to streams of some kind. I love old-time radio. Old-time radio is very cool to me. And so I would be listening to old-time radio streams. Well, the stuff that Google would show me if I was driving was related to that kind of entertainment. So Google's insidious, and they're now beyond the point of no return. The only way that they would not be beyond the point of return is if Trump does a second term, and if Congress and the Senate keep going after them with me standing behind them. I mean, I actually I tried to tell him. I told one of my senator's flunkies, because he wouldn't meet with me, I said, look, what you need to do is let me or somebody like me who knows the right questions to ask hand out some introductory questions that the senator will not understand at all. And then he wears an earpiece. And I'm in a back room, or somebody like me in a back room, and he asks this question, and that will lead to follow-up questions that I will feed to him, that'll lead to more questions that I will feed to him. If they don't do that, it's going to be screwed. They just don't know what they're doing. They don't know how to do this in a technological way. All they know is the law. And so if Trump is reelected, we might get to a situation where we'll have some more hearings. But I mean, God, anytime Zuckerberg was up there, I knew he was lying half the time, but the senators and congresspeople couldn't tell because they don't know technology. So we are seeing backlash. We're certainly seeing backlash from that big tech propaganda complex. It's happening all over the place. Just the very fact that when the president tweets something out, they will say there's no basis for this voter fraud stuff, when there clearly, obviously is. We will see how it goes. I am not sure Trump gets to be a second term. I just don't know how that's going to fall down. If it goes to the House, maybe. If it goes to the Senate, maybe. Maybe they just say there's too much possibility for civil unrest because if we say that Trump's going to be the president, the left is going to lose their freaking minds. If you thought their screaming it was horrible for the last 4 years, if they put him in and the media propaganda complex and the big tech propaganda complex are saying it's all awful and it's just solely because of the Republicans and it's terrible, he shouldn't be in office, the left is going to lose their minds in a way that we have never seen before and could well lead to civil unrest or war, which is why I'm not clear that they might not just put Biden in if it gets to the House and the Senate, because they can look out, hopefully with any brains, and say, Do we really want to run that risk? By the same token, Biden's a horrible person to have out there. He would not make a good president. I don't think he'll be president for very long. He'll be president long enough to, get inaugurated, maybe do a few things, but the guy clearly has cognitive problems, and it's getting worse, and it never gets better. I know that from my own personal experience. It doesn't get better. Kamala Harris is going to be president at some point. God knows who she would nominate for her vice president. Probably somebody leftist like her who would ultimately try to implement the Green New Deal and kill at least 1 billion people worldwide, including Americans. They are just really, really provincial. They do not understand how agriculture works and how it requires a lot of modern science. And if you cripple it by making them go solar or something stupid like that, people are going to die. People are going to die by the hundreds of thousands, millions, billion. Easily could be 1 billion people dead. So, I tell you what, I've been on for about an hour and a half. My my eyes are probably red. I really should be laying down because I haven't had any sleep in more than 24 hours. I think I'm going to cut tonight's show short because of that. So, I guess that is pretty much all I have to say about that. I would, of course, love to keep the conversation going. So please leave your comments, questions, and nasty remarks. I'll do my best to get back to you. So thank you for watching. That is all the time that we have today for this episode of Tales from SYL Ranch, where everyone is entitled to my opinion. And I'm Bill Stone.
Ultimate power in this world has always been one simple thing: the control and manipulation of minds.